Welcome to Pickleball, Michigan and beyond, a show that explores the people, players, places, and most importantly, communities that make up pickleball in Michigan and around the world. Here's your host, Tony Conley.
Welcome back to Pickleball, Michigan and beyond. I'm your host, Tony Conley. Thanks so much for tuning in. Our next guest we had on last week, and we had to bring him back because there's so much to talk about. Pawluk is a teaching pro. Not only does he teach at the Michigan Athletic Club in East Lansing, but he also, outside of that area, is a teaching pro. And by the way, if you ever see his name up playing in a club or a bar, look him up because he's a great musician from what I understand. I'm going to go have a couple of cocktails and listen to you sometime soon, as Jesse Stipkak from Reno's North said you're pretty good there, Carl.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, so we talked a lot about pickleball and how it's growing and the origins and whatnot, but I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the rules and ratings or whatever. So let's dive right into it. Let's talk about the basic rules of pickleball and just briefly talk about the kitchen, how the serve has to be under the hip, that kind of stuff, Carl.
Yeah, well, it's a relatively small court in terms of racket sports. I liken it to like standing on a big ping pong table. It sort of has that kind of feel to it. Although it looks like tennis while you're playing, some of the strategies are counterintuitive to tennis. And so the basics, the court's 20 by 44. Like I said, relatively small. The kitchen is that's the slang term. It's actually called the no volley zone. So you can't, the cool part about the game is if you start at the net, if you move 7 feet towards either baseline, you've got the no volley zone. So there's a 14-foot basically space that separates the players on the opposition, which is kind of nice because, you don't want to be standing a foot from each other while you're just crushing this thing. So the kitchen or the no volley zone kind of allows the game to develop and allows there to be, that chess match that we talked about last time. So the rules are quite different. As I mentioned, when I teach my beginner clinics, I go over the scoring last because that tends to be a challenge for a lot of people. It just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. But serving has to be underhand, so you start the game with a serve. You can only score when you serve. There's side outs, much like volleyball, since you can only score on a serve. Obviously, if I'm playing against you and a partner, you want to try to stifle us so that you can get a side out, in which then it becomes your serve. So the serve has to bounce. If I'm serving it to you and your partner, you've got to let it bounce. And when you return it to me and my partner, we also have to let it bounce. But after that, you can then take the ball out of the air. But as I mentioned, that 14-foot kitchen or no volley zone area up by the net is interesting, that you cannot be standing in there. So you have to let the ball bounce. And I think for beginners, you see a ball floating up in the air, you just want to kill that thing, and so you step in there just to crush it, and you have to avoid that. I think maybe one of the most stifling things for beginners is also letting the return bounce. So if I serve it to you and you return it to me, so many people want to serve and then kind of head towards the net, where you just can't do that, because then you end up backpedaling, trying to catch up.
And what I've learned, and I've played 8 times, Carl, what I've learned, and I'm a competitive guy, played volleyball and basketball. So, I'm aiming for spots when I serve. I'm trying to hit it down the middle. I'm trying to hit it to people's backhands. I'm trying to hit it down the line, just trying to hit it to where they ain't. Where my challenge is, and where I see other beginners, is just the unforced errors, and they're just a killer. They just kill me.
Yeah. I mean, that's the crux of the game. We spoke that tennis and racquetball and those kind of games, that's a game of winners, because you're hitting that ball so fast that, and the tennis court is large. So you have that opportunity to hit a winning shot, a passing shot by your opponent. But in pickleball, there's just not that much space. There's no lanes really to hit that ball down. So in pickleball, it's a game of errors. I simply want to get the ball over the net and force you to make an error. I'm really not trying to hit a winner all that often.
What uh, what I noticed too, it has a parallel with volleyball. I was watching a pro match. I believe it was the Australian Open, but like volleyball, the players were giving signals where to hit the ball, where to play. I saw some would start in one court and then they would switch over after the serve. So I
Mhm.
thought that was pretty cool how those rules are similar.
Yeah, I mean, they call it stacking. For instance, I'm a lefty, and so it's a big advantage for my partner and I to switch in a manner that gives us both forehands down the center. And so that basically tells an opponent, we dare you to hit it down the center. You really don't want to do that. And so it kind of shrinks the court for your opponent when you can make those switches. And as far as like serve it right or serve it left, that just kind of sets up if I want to poach like in tennis or whatever. If I'm anticipating you are serving, you're going to kick it out far right, I might move a little bit that way. So after the return, we get into a good spot.
You know what's interesting too, Carl, is I've seen players like Jesse Stipkak, like my wife Julie, who are able to just switch the paddle from one hand and just go lefty or go righty in Jesse's. Do you see that a lot in play?
I don't see it a lot. There's a one young man that I've played with in the past. He's probably one of the best in the area, Isaac. He switches hands. I think as you get up in level, it gets harder and harder because if you target someone and they're trying to switch hands, they can often just get caught. You can't switch in time. So I don't know that it's a huge benefit. It does benefit some people in if they're less mobile, for instance. If you can switch paddles right and left-handed, you can cover a much larger span than having to go from a forehand and then reach across your body. When you go to that backhand, it really shortens your span. But like I said, if you can switch hands, you can cover more area. So it's more of like more often you see it if somebody is just bailing out, that somebody hit a great shot, they're not going to be able to reach it, so somebody will switch hands.
So soon, Carl, my wife and I are going to go to a workshop that you're going to teach, and I think there's going to be 8 or 10 folks there. Tell us a little bit about that. What you're going to teach, what people experience, because I know other coaches do the same thing.
Yeah, I was talking with another coach last night. For these types of clinics, you can go an hour or two, and the thing of it is there's so much nuance to this game that you just can't cover it all. So at our clinic tomorrow, we're going to talk about paddle position and court position. Those are, I see beginners kind of holding their paddle in either the wrong, like a grip that's not beneficial, or perhaps during a point, their paddles down and not prepared for the next shot. So we're going to work on, depending on where I hit the ball across the net, where do I want to have my paddle in preparation for the next shot? And then we're going to work on like court awareness. So if I hit the ball far across the net to the right side, where should my partner and I be standing so that we're covering the most angles possible? So we're going to drill that pretty hard.
And what about folks who are looking for more personal instruction with 1 or 2 people? What are those sessions like, Carl?
That's usually more drilling. When you're working with 1 or 2 people, you're drilling on a particular skill usually,
Okay.
and oftentimes it's dinking or third shot drops. That's like the most important aspects. You've got to be able to be consistent. You've got to be able to be satisfied continually hitting a soft shot. I see so many beginners where, and I was this way too, even
You
up
want
at
to go, ah!
yeah, you just want to kill it. You lose patience, but that's not a benefit. So um, the 1 and 2 person thing, it's better to work on a skill, because with just drilling with 2 people or 3 people, you can't really envision how an actual point would unfold playing doubles. You can't visualize what a certain shot does to a partnership.
So, Carl, what would you suggest to players who are looking for an instructor?
Well, I think it is a huge benefit. People, I think you only know what you know, and I think coaches usually have a keen eye for, okay, what's this person kind of lacking? How can we make this person better? Um, but gosh, there's a lot of good coaches out there. I got certified through PPR, Professional Pickleball Registry. That's probably the most common one. And if you go to the PPR website, I believe you can search an area for local coaches who are certified in that regard. Um, but other than that, it's just like personalized things. You know, if you gel with that person, if that person can relate. You know, sometimes some of the coaches are pretty young, and the clients are of the older variety, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
if you've got a young stud athlete who's coaching an older person, well, maybe they can't necessarily relate to some of those mobility issues, and so I think it's just such a personal take on the game.
Carl, right after college, a friend and I got jobs and we were sharing an apartment together, and he discovered golf. And after playing a few times, he went all in with new clubs. He had all the gear, the clothes, the visors, the gloves, all that stuff. And what I've been noticing through conversation and what I see in my limited time playing, as folks start talking about what kind of racket should I get, what kind of shoes, what kind of gear, talk a little bit about what you suggest folks who are ready to move up to that kind of level.
Yeah, well, number one, man, it starts from the ground up. I mean, you got to have good shoes. Wear court shoes. I see a lot of people wearing running shoes, and I get it that running shoes are super comfy, but there's so much lateral movement in pickleball. I mean, you're not running forward and backward very much, right? It's all side to side, and so it's just not worth that roll, you know, like rolling an ankle. So get a good court shoe. I would recommend an insole because you know, you're playing on that concrete, that gritty concrete surface for the most part. And I know after teaching, you know, if I'm teaching 6 hours a day or something, I get pretty, you know, my joints are hurting. So certainly get quality court shoes. And then in terms of a paddle, let's call it a paddle. It That's personal too. Like I said, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you got little hands or big hands, I've got big hands, so I put like 2 or 3 over grips on my paddle just because I don't want that paddle spinning around in my hand. Paddles are measured in millimeters of thickness, and so most commonly, the most common upper level paddles, people tend to play with a 16 millimeter paddle. That just has a little more material inside, some foam, and it allows that paddle to in the material to absorb the energy of the ball. So there's not as they talk about pop. So if I'm using a 16 millimeter paddle, for me personally, I feel like I have more control at that no volley zone line. I can keep the ball a lot softer. I've used 14 millimeter paddles in the past. There's more pop. You know, if I'm playing singles, sometimes it's a benefit to have a paddle that's got a little more power behind it. When you play singles in pickleball, it's a little more tennis-like, where there's, you know, it's a powerful serve and powerful return, so you want to have some velocity.
And I've heard folks talking about eye gear, that's important.
Yeah. Oh man, it really is. I mean, fortunately for me, or I guess fortunately, I have to wear glasses anyways. But I've hit my own eye like 3 or 4 times, and that's probably the most prevalent. So I know a lot of people are scared of the person across the net from them, but you usually have enough time to protect yourself from your opponent. But the eye injuries come when somebody hits a quick shot at me, and if my paddle's in front of my chest, if I miss it and it catches the edge, it tends to want to come up by your eyes. So that's how I've been hit mostly. Excuse me. Or if you and I are partners and somebody hits it in between you and I, maybe we're both turning towards the ball. You know, it could come off of your partner's paddle too. So, yeah, I certainly recommend eyewear. It's just not worth it. It's not worth an eye injury over this. In terms of recommendations, I don't really have a brand recommendation, but quite frankly, since I'm not sponsored, I guess who cares? What I would suggest is just get a pair of like gas station sunglasses and pop the lenses out.
Mm.
You don't need the glass; you need the frame,
Right.
to protect the impact. You know. Also, you know, if you go frameless, then you know you're not fogging up the lenses. You know, you're not getting sweat all over the place. So that's a good place to start.
So, Carl, I'm a beginner. There's nowhere to go but up for me. I want to talk about rankings because I know that that's kind of part of your job, what you do. Talk about the rankings, how they work, and how you determine when a player moves up.
Yeah, it's the rating system. It's a point system. There's different entities that do that. I have some notes here with USA Pickleball. That's probably the most prevalent way to look at it. So if you go to USA Pickleball, the ratings go from 1 to I think the best player in the world is like a 7. Okay. And so when you go to different parks or venues, they'll have open play usually. Now, sometimes you can intermingle everybody, and sometimes they kind of isolate the levels. And that just makes it a little bit more enjoyable. It's kind of sets the expectation for whoever's arriving. So if you're a 3-0 player, let's say, just by definition, or say a 3-5, that's pretty prevalent. A 3-5 can kind of hit some moderate forehands. They tend to avoid the backhand. You can tell they can't really, they're trying to dink the ball or hit softly, but they don't have much control. They're trying to hit a third shot drop every once in a while, but don't have much control. So they understand the game, and they have some control over the ball, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's like a 3-5. Well, you can imagine when it gets lower than that, if I show up, for instance, well, that beginner player is not going to have a whole lot of fun because they probably won't get to the ball very often.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm not going to have very much fun because it's not that competitive style game.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a tough thing to navigate, because we're human beings. We're prideful. Sometimes, we think we're better than we are. We want to be involved in maybe a game that's better than what we're ready for. So those are tough things to navigate, but there's entities that can rate you. Around here, we use the Duper score. It's DUPR. That's just the digital way to rate folks. And how you get that? Well, you can either pay for it through some folks that are certified to do that, mm-hmm. or you could enter a local tournament that's going to be Duper scored. Okay. And so if you just decided to enter a 3-5 tournament, let's say you're athletic, but you're new to the game. Okay. Mm-hmm. If you entered a 3-5 tournament based on your results against other people who have a rating, there's kind of an algorithm that will adjust your score appropriately. So it's not super accurate when you're new because results can vary. Some people have a Duper score or rating that's low, and some people have one that's inflated. And so the more tournaments you play in, the more accurate that number tends to become.
And I think, Carl, folks who are just starting out like me, I guess I kind of got lucky with Jesse Stipkak, who owns the Reno's North Sports Bar. I've recently talked with Karen Jackson, who's out of the Kalamazoo area, but those are people who run events, and they try to match people up with same skill sets, and it seems to be really fun. And she introduces people, so you get to know people, and I think that was a key for me really enjoying the game.
It really is, man. I couldn't agree more. I think policing that, the term policing, I guess, turns some people off. But if you can, basically, what all you're doing is you're setting an expectation. And how many of us in all areas of our life, things tend to go south when expectations aren't met. And so the beauty of having those expectations and somebody to police that is that you can be satisfied with the product that you're participating in.
So, Carl, how does a player know when it's time, when it's a good time for them to enter a tournament, and kind of where do you go and where do you decide? Being someone who coached AAU basketball, I was around a lot of tournaments where players were playing up or down, and they shouldn't have been. Teams were playing down just to win the tournament. How do you figure out where to go and where to play?
Yeah, that's a toughie. I think my first couple tournaments, I noticed that, I think my first tournament, I was a 4-0 player. And so I signed up for the 4-0 thing, and it was, the players were way better than that. And so mm-hmm. I thought, gosh, maybe I'm overrated or maybe I'm overrated. And I think if you go back a couple years, people were tending to play down a little bit, maybe to win, so I guess it just depends on the person, what they want. I personally, I want to play. I like playing better competition than myself, and it does hurt and sting a little bit to get your butt kicked, but I like that kind of challenge. But that's not for everybody. The beauty of a lot of these pickleball tournaments is you could be nearly a beginner. You have to know the rules and such so that you can have a decent tournament game. But tournaments have levels broken down, 3-0, 3-5, 4-0, all the way up. Okay. And then if they're large tournaments with a lot of participation, then you get the age brackets where, you're playing with your peers rather than, somebody super young or super old,
So Carl, you're playing up, you're playing at a pretty high level, you're competitive, as a teacher, but as a player, you having fun?
No, it's a blast. It's a blast. It's borderline a problem to like it this. I think about pickleball all the time, and I'm not alone. I know plenty of people that do, but it's just so fun. I couldn't possibly promote it enough.
It reminds me of some golfing friends I have. A really good friend of mine loves golf, probably gets out 2 or 3 times a week minimum. And he has this term that he uses. I got to get an emergency 9 in, man. It's nice out today. I got to keep going. And just talking with pickleball players, just talking with Karen Jackson out of the Kalamazoo area. I mean, she's playing like 3-4 times a week, sometimes more.
Oh yeah, there's more. Our friend Jessie, she gets after it quite a bit. Of course, she's got a nice venue for herself. But yeah, I texted some pals today. I had some time this afternoon, and I couldn't find anybody to play. I tell you, I was bummed. And I'm going to play in the morning, for sure. So it's silly to be sad about something like that. But man, I really wanted to play today.
And what I didn't understand, final question for you, Carl, or comment from you is, I didn't realize the movement and the workout that you get. My wife, on her watch, has an app which not only counts steps but calories, and a couple of times she's burned more than 1,000 calories in 2 hours.
Oh yeah, and the higher level the game, the more you're moving, the more you're sweating. I mean, like I talked about this chess match. When you're playing high level pickleball, sometimes a single point can be a 30 shot exchange.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can be sort of intense. So I've enjoyed it. I know a lot of people, it's changed their life health wise. So it's been great.
And one more question for you, Carl. You mentioned doubles and singles, and I've heard people talking about that. I have not seen anyone play singles, but I can't imagine, because even though that court is small, it's still a lot of area to cover.
Yeah, it's a lot of area to cover, and the ball doesn't bounce very much. So you can be very quick and still not get to a ball just because that ball's not going to hang in the air very long. But the beauty of it is if you're not super mobile, you can play skinny singles and just use the half width of the court.
Mm-hmm.
You could either go straight ahead or diagonally. There's several ways to do it. But it's a great way to drill. It's a great way to get better. And then again, if you're short on numbers, you can always play singles.
It seems like it just reminds me of euchre, from the aspect of there's just so many ways to play to get people involved in playing. It's pretty cool.
No, it's great. It's great. And Jesse is just one of the best at promoting it, and just like the inclusion for everybody, And there's tons of different formats. There's round robins and ladders and all kinds of different ways to run an event or a tournament, just to get extra enjoyment.
All right, Carl, if folks want to get more information from you about individual instruction or about your clinics, where can they go?
You could go to my Facebook page is Carl Pawluk Pickleball Academy. You could call the Michigan Athletic Club and get a hold of me via email there as well. But I'm definitely out and about.
All right, Carl, looking forward to meeting you in person, shaking your hand. I appreciate your time so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I'll see you soon.
I'm Tony Conley. This has been episode number 2, Pickleball Michigan and beyond. We'll be back next week. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Pickleball Michigan and Beyond. Follow us on Facebook and check out our website, pickleballmichiganandbeyond.com.